Good evening. I'm Alan Price, Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. On behalf of all my library and foundation colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome all of you who are watching tonight's program online. Thank you for joining us this evening. I would also like to acknowledge the generous support from our underwriters for the Kennedy Library Forums, lead sponsors Bank of America and the Lowell Institute, and our media sponsors, the Boston Globe and WBUR. We are also very pleased to be collaborating in co-presenting tonight's discussion in conjunction with the citywide read of Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower and in association with ArtsEmerson, New Roots AME Church, and the Boston Public Library. We look forward to a robust question and answer period this evening. You'll see full instructions on screen for submitting your questions via email or comments on our YouTube page during the program. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to explore these critical issues with our distinguished guests this evening. I'm now delighted to introduce tonight's speakers. I'm pleased to extend a warm welcome to Toshi Reagon, who is an award-winning musician and an Emerson College artist in residence. She is a talented and versatile singer, composer, musician, curator, and producer with a profound ear for sonic Americana, from folk to funk, from blues to rock, with music and lyrics composed by Toshi Reagon in collaboration with her mother, Bernice Johnson Reagon. Her production of Parable of the Sower brings together over 30 original musical anthems and requiems drawn from 200 years of Black music to adapt Octavia E. Butler's sci-fi Afro-futurist masterpiece for the stage. I'm also delighted to welcome the Reverend Mariama White-Hammond, the founding pastor of New Roots AME Church in Dorchester, a multiracial, multi-class community that is innovating new ways of being a church. She is active in secular and interfaith justice efforts and uses an intersectional lens in her ecological work, challenging folks to see the connections between immigration and climate change, or the relationship between energy policy and economic justice. She is a fellow with the Green Justice Coalition, which brings together 8 social environmental justice groups from around Massachusetts. She speaks throughout the country and has received numerous awards. Finally, I'm so pleased to welcome Portia Olaiwola, our moderator for this evening's discussion, to the library virtually this evening. She is a writer, performer, educator, and curator who uses Afrofuturism and surrealism to examine historical and current issues in the Black, woman, and queer diasporas. She is an individual World Poetry Slam champion and the artistic director at Mass Leap, a literary youth organization. She is the author of the poetry collection I Shimmer Sometimes Too, and is the current poet laureate for the city of Boston. Please join me in welcoming our special guests.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Alan, so much for that introduction. That was lovely. I know we are virtual, but I feel so warm already. So excited to be here with Toshi and the Reverend Mariama, talking about these things, talking about these issues, and we're just going to get into it. I'm going to ask a couple of questions for the first hour, and then I'm going to turn it over to viewers, audience members. So please get your questions ready. I thought it would be great to start off with kind of a check-in question based off Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower. For those who have not read Parable of the Sower or who do not know much about Octavia E. Butler, Butler is a sci-fi writer. She is the winner of multiple awards, the Nebula, as well as the Hugo Science Fiction Awards, and she's the only science fiction writer to get a MacArthur Genius Grant, right? So she is, I like to say, the fairy godmother of Afrofuturism. But she wrote Parable of the Sower, which follows a young protagonist through a journey of survival in a futuristic, dystopic America. And in the novel, the protagonist has these grab and go packs, right? Whenever things are about to go down, about to go off, when things feel like you need to leave your home immediately, she's Lauren Olamina is urging for folks to have a grab and go pack. So my check-in question for both Toshi and Reverend Mariama is, what is in your grab and go pack? What 5 items, if you need to right now, leave, close this laptop and bounce, what is it that you have in your pack? So whoever wants to go first, please.
Okay, I'll go first. 5 is really hard, you know, because I have one and it's got a lot of stuff in it. But I guess I would say that you know, water and something that will help me be able to drink water. Like, so the like pill things, or just something that will do that. But I have water, and then some kind of currency. I don't know what would be currency at whatever time, but some kind of currency. It could be cash. It could be, you know, I think about all the time how there's not like all this digital currency in the book. There's like cash and then a couple of things. So I would have something that probably one thing that could keep me warm and that I could actually sleep on. Just like something that is just very adaptive to this thing. Would have to do rain, would have to do warmth. Maybe it has a layer, maybe it has a shell, maybe, you know, it need to be some puffiness in it. And then food, like really food that lasts a long time. So it would be like bars or jerky, or, you know, and I'm stuck between, if I have one more, some kind of device so I could hear news, like probably one of those wind up transistor things that's also a light, and also a this, and also a that, and also a that, you know. But also at the same time, I'm like, I need to be able to make fire. And so, you know, that's why my thing is, I'm like, so, and then the other thing, I just is like something to write, you know. So I'm like in seven basic things other than 5, but that's it.
So I think we have some similar things. This is my favorite water bottle. I never go, I don't leave home without it. So of course it would have to come with me. And I have, Toshi, a hand crank radio with a flashlight on it. And so, you know, and it's supposed to have a solar charger, but let me tell you, I've tried to use it. You need a hand crank. The solar charger is not, it's not legit. And of course, you know, the journal and pen, I think that, you know, I think a lot about Lauren Olamina, and one of the things is like recording what you learn in the journey, tips that people give you, moments when you just want to record. I think some of what challenges us so often is that we forget the lessons that we learned. And so I think, you know, that journal and pen is really more essential than we might think. And since we're, you know, not exactly sticking to it, because you're right, when you really buy a go pack, you try to figure out how you can get as much as possible in it. And so I thought I would, if I had to bring a book to read, I thought about Octavias Brood, because it's a great book of short stories by our good friend, edited by our friend Adrienne Marie Brown. And when she first came out with it, I convened a group of women, multi-generational group of women on my back porch, and we read this, and it just, each of the stories really gives you something to think about. What is beauty? What is memory? You know, there's a story in here from Detroit. My husband is a Detroiter, about the Detroit River. And, you know, so I just think that in the midst of everything we have to do to survive, we also have to keep our spirits up. And so I think of that as a great way for us to share in some entertaining but also thought-provoking stories. So.
Word, absolutely. Thank you all both for answering that. You're making me think that it's time for me to, get my own grab and go pack or think about navigating that system. I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit, or connect gears, if you will. But thinking about, you talked, Reverend Mariama, about, writing things down and having this book, and the protagonist, Olamina, writes down her own belief system. So I'm just thinking about, while we're here, climate change, and specifically right now, what belief systems are shaping our climate? What belief systems right now?
Yeah.
And then we'll transform that later on. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so I am a Christian, and I think, as was mentioned in my bio, our church, our tagline is reimagining what church can be. And we are really trying to rethink, because what we do recognize that there's a lot of things, a lot of theological interpretations within Christianity that have a lot to do with the mess that we're in right now. I think this whole notion that humans are entitled to dominate the earth, for me, is a misreading of what Genesis says. For me, when I look at it, it says that over 6 days, God created everything, and we were like the last few hours on the 6th day. And God said all of the things were good. It didn't say like all of these things were so not worthy of saving, but you're like the bomb and just do whatever you want. It does not say that. It says, in fact, what it says is God calls us to be with the earth as God is with us. And that feels like a massive responsibility, because I'll just be telling, I say all the time, if I were God, I wouldn't keep dealing with me, because I'm sometimey and I get it and then I don't get it, and then my prayer life, it's on point and then it's off, so I think this whole notion that humans get to lord over the earth, that humans get to be in charge and control it, is deeply also connected to ideas about which humans get to be on top of which other humans. And so there's this whole hierarchical sort of domination and entitlement system that has driven so many of the systems, so many of the decisions, so many of the ideological frames of this country and of humanity in really destructive ways. And so what would it mean to live like each and everything is really good? Like, I admit there's a few things, I try to do that. There is an outbreak of rats in Dorchester, and I'm not yet able to see the rats as a good thing. I'm like, they just need to go. But I do try with spiders, and I'm not quite there with mosquitoes, but there's so many things around us that we just take for granted. We just ignore because we think it's all about us. It's all how awesome we are, how great we are, what we deserve. And that way of thinking has led us to a place where the balance of the planet is in trouble. And we are pushing it to the point where Mother Earth is going to have to say, like, you got to go. You don't know how to act. You don't know how to live in this house. You act like you're the only person here. You leave your trash around. You don't flush the toilet when you go. You act a mess in this house. And so, yeah, I think it's an unfortunate reality that our belief that we are the best thing happening, it has led us down a path that's actually putting our own lives in danger. So we have to change.
Yes. Here. I think, my belief systems, there's a multitude of them, and they're based in, the teachings that come through my family line. And they're based in the activism of several movements that humans have done to try to create balance on the planet. And I think the biggest teacher right now is just to see the imbalance, because everything is connected. You can't separate anything from anything else. And I think most of the species of the earth understand it, that in a particular kind of way that humans have resisted, that we think we're separate from everything else, and that our actions don't matter. And we don't have a zen about like our capabilities. We don't have a zen that's in tune with the earth. So even though you can create all of these things, there's not a question of like, well, how will it affect the planet, and how will it affect other living and breathing entities on the earth? And so it's, as long as it is something that will make money, as long as it is something that will allow, I think, a very few people to have control, it's a go. And the things that we do that we don't have answers for, like we don't have an answer for nuclear power. You know, we don't have an answer for the mass weapons of destruction. We don't have an answer for Bluetooth. Like we don't have an answer for so many of the things that we create, and we create them for reasons that like, how many shortcuts do you need between your currency and something that you might want to buy? And it's like the multitude of the technology is based on triggering something that people think they need to get to faster. It's not even things that they don't get to, it's that they need to get to faster. It's triggering a need, and then it's bypassing the underneath. And the underneath is like, but do people have food? Do people have access to water? Is the water being protected and open? Like, do people have jobs? Are we going to do so much technology that humans don't have anything to do? Even though we know humans really need something to do. All of these steps are out of line with, I think, the belief system of the planet and the belief system of indigenous cultures wherever you live. Like wherever you are, you find the indigenous culture and see what they say, because they usually are like, no, don't put pipelines underneath the ground. Don't, you know. So my family has so many different religious practitioners in it. On my mother's side, almost everybody is a musician or a priest, no matter what job they have. And so I definitely believe in the spirit beyond my body and beyond what I can see. But I don't belong to any one practice. I just like to pay attention to good teachings and wherever they come from, including Octavia E. Butler.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You know, it sounds like by looking at what is currently impacting this climate, we can also learn how to, you know, impact it rightfully, you know, whether that is to go back and get it with, you know, these good teachings, or figuring out how not to dominate the earth and understanding everything is connected. I'm just over here taking notes for my grab and go pack, you know. I really am. So I'm loving this. I appreciate this. And I think you're right. I'm just gonna keep segueing. Like, there is one person that I have learned a lot from is Butler, is Octavia E. Butler. I think, Toshi, you came to one of my classes at Emerson, and it was like, go to the archives. And then January 2020, and then March 2020, I was in the archives, and I had just been poring over that. And then Reverend Mariama, you know, I have been doing some Afrofuturistic work, and I have been hearing so much about you and these book series that you had going on at the church. And so I want to lean a little bit more into Butler, since that just seems to be a thread that we have, and look a little bit closely at the protagonist, Lauren Oya Olamina. And just thinking about one, right, this person developing these belief systems, right, to figure out how to navigate the planet and their survival, and also this person being a young person, right? I think at the beginning of the story, you know, Olamina's maybe 15, 16 years old. So my question to you all, and whoever wants to answer first, is what is it that we can learn from Lauren Oya Olomina, and what is the thing to unlearn from Olomina? Take your time, you know?
Well, you know, so Octavia Butler has really been a teacher, I think, because she helps us to explore what the possible futures are, and to ask the question, not just what they might be, but what do we want them to be? You know, and that's I think one of the things that's really powerful about Olomina is that she early on, right, when her world is still, you know, when everybody else is trying to keep the world going, she gets really clear, like, this is not long-term sustainable. You know, like there's a point where this is going to collapse. And she leans into trying to imagine what's on the other side of that collapse. And I think that's really actually a powerful thing to think about for the moment that we're in our country. Because when I look at what's going on, I think we all feel a tension. I think there's a palpable anxiety that the world is falling apart. And I think the tension between various viewpoints, I'll just say it's not one or the other, but I do think that there is a group of people that thinks the solution is to try to go back to what was. Like, if we could just recapture what we had before, then this wouldn't feel so terrible. I think all of us feel like, I don't know where we're going, right? And I think there's some people who've been on top for a long time, and what they not only do they not know where we're going, they're looking and they're saying, my numbers are not what they used to be, and wherever we're going, I don't think I'm gonna be on top. So I would like to go back to where we were, right? Like, I want to go back to when whiteness wasn't something I had to interrogate, where nobody was calling me out about it, and I just got to be on top, where I didn't have to face the fact that my privilege came from other people's denial, right? And so there are people who would like to go back, and I think in some ways that's a form of burying your head in the sand. But I think there's also those of us who call ourselves quote unquote progressive, who you know, talk about a world that we want to see and are not very active in figuring out how we actually gonna build that world, right? Like, it's sometimes I think we think it's gonna just come together through magical thinking, right? Like, if we just protest the world that is and say it needs to be different, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be so. And I think she realizes that. She realizes, you know what? This collapse is not gonna be so great. And I need to start figuring it out. And that's why she starts packing that go pack. How do I start orienting myself towards where I'm going, and not see that collapse and be so afraid that I try to grasp at something that there's no going back. And so I think that that's one piece of her sort of ability to look into that abyss and be unafraid and start leaning into it, that I think we should hold. Now I got to figure out, now what are we leaving behind? So I'll pass it over to you, Toshi, and figure out if I can think of anything we should leave behind, because I do love Lamina. But, you know, she's like us all.
I mean, you know, and for those of you who don't know the book very well or haven't dug in, you know, Lauren Olomina is 15 years old, and her father is 55, and the book starts on their birthday. They have the same birthday, and her father's a Baptist minister. And the one thing about Lauren is that she has a syndrome called hyperempathy. And hyperempathy syndrome basically makes it so that she experiences like whatever pain that she witnesses. And if, so if somebody bumps their head and she sees it, she's going to feel like she bumped their head. If somebody gets cut, then she will feel that she got cut. The same thing works for pleasure, but she lives in a time where there's not that much pleasurable things going on, but it needs to be like physical pleasure, like people making love or something like that. So while she is as Reverend Mariama says, is like, while she's doing all of these amazing things, she has to have a consciousness of, she lives with a sensory device that can let her experience death. And so like her management, her self-sustaining management is built on lots and lots of practice. Like she actually finds maps. She reads everything. She's like a kid that, finished high school. She was done with high school and taking college courses. She's that kid that can help out. She teaches little kids. She does grown people stuff, and she learns as much as she can learn from anything. And she finds the old books about plants, and she finds the whole things. And this isn't to say like, your world is her world, but what it is to say is while you are in your world, that I think Octavia very intentionally put a character in a book that would feel things on a very, very real level to open up the idea around fear. If you know you can experience death, do you make sure like you never see anybody die? And for Lauren, she was pretty sure she would experience people dying. And so she wanted to test. So she went out and she shot a bird and experienced death. And then she something bigger and experienced death. And then by the time she was looking at, people dying, she had created a system in her body she can't get rid of it, but she could experience it in a way that she could tell herself, we're going to die and we're going to come back. So I feel like the thing and there's so many things I learned, but one of the things is her systems of knowledge is that she just felt like she took everything she believed very seriously, and it didn't cost her anything to be deep about it. And it didn't cost her anything to write it down and keep a journal. It didn't cost her anything to ask questions of elders. It didn't cost her anything to learn how to cook, the favorite foods of her family. It didn't cost her anything to learn what the trees were around her. It didn't cost her anything to study maps. It didn't cost her anything to test the capacity of her body. And even though she was developing a belief system, she knew the Bible. Like, so she in a pinch, she could lead a sermon. Like, so that practice that doesn't cancel out the reality of your time, and it doesn't cancel out like that you might be afraid. But what it does is it's almost gives you so much of a boost of possibilities. And especially when it's fear, when a lot of us get frozen around fear or avoiding fear, and she jumped right into it. She's like, well, let me touch it. Let me see what this fear is and how I can react to it. And I think we need more of that. I try to do that more, and it is challenging to face like what you're afraid of, but I try to get into a practice because I see that it benefits you in those moments. And again, they don't even have to be catastrophic moments. It's like in the moments of surprise, when you are more grounded, you are able to think your way through those surprises.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those things. I appreciate both of those comments. I think folks said, both said possibility. And I think that is what's really interesting about, the other side of the collapse, so to speak, is that there is so much possibility. And I think Butler writes, that Olamina was looking directly into the abyss. What did it mean? What could you learn from looking right into the abyss? And I think it does feel a little dark, right now it feels a little strange. It feels weird, the world and the climate, both politically and, atmospherically. It all feels a little strange. And I wonder what it is that we need to look directly at in order to, suit up and change. Follow-up question, if that's cool, if that's okay. I work with young people, and so this is always on my mind, but what role would you say young people have in shaping not the revolution, but just the future, just naming the future, naming those possibilities in the future? What role do young folks have?
I'll take it first. Young people are everything to me. I feel like, revolutions, they usually, young people jump out in the front line real fast, and start to shape the temperature of, how we gonna do and how we gonna be. And we've seen that over and over again. Generational revolutions are really important. That, I think there was a time where people, I look at my parents, and my parents were in SNCC. And I know, like, the SNCC was like, they were just considered to be like, we can't really control these young people and what they want to do and how they want to do it. And it's not like Martin Luther King was that old, it wasn't like everybody else was that old, but it's like the center power of the movement. I think people were in their 20s, mid to late 20s, and then you went up, and SNCC was like 17, 18, 19, 20. And SNCC was and SNCC had these singers, the freedom singers. And whenever I think about that, I asked my mom, and she said once she found the movement, that centered her for the rest of her life. She never let go of that person, that energetic force that let her know what she was supposed to do for the rest of her life. So that always says to me, not only is it important for young people to lead, but it's important to really understand that more than a young person is leading. That's a whole human being that's starting young in their leadership, that has the potential to kind of become an ancient one, like very wise and very good in their craft, like by the time they're 30 or 40 years old. And that is really important. I also think young people really know what's important. Where, there's so many things, but they know what's important. They know what we should focus on. I really want to uplift, the young people's revolution around Black trans lives. That, has had to focus all of our amazing revolutions and make us really, really, especially on Black trans women, say, no, this is one of our lines. Like, this is one of all of our lines. And if we can't get with this line, like, we're going to be missing something. So, I'm here for the young folk, and learn all the time from them.
Yeah, so I also, my activism began as a young person, and then my first real job was as a director of a youth program, where I was sometimes only a little bit older than the young people that I was working with. I think young people do have always a responsibility to speak out, to be a moral conscience, to name those things. I mean, I think even in human development, there's a way in which, as young people transition from being children to being adults, they see these contradictions between what we say and what we're actually doing. And they see it clearly. The rest, over time, you get used to those things, and you start acclimating to the justifications. It doesn't mean that they're any truer, but it means that you get worn down. And I think it is an important role of young people to just to call it out, to name it, to speak it. I also think that young people are really called to innovate. I think the fear of failure is a human struggle. And I think sometimes over your life, as you fail more and more, because that's just a part of life, you get more afraid to launch out. And I think that there is a courage that many times young people can have, that they can jump out. And I say many times because I've also had the lived experience of working with young people who've had their spirits crushed like way too. I've seen educational institutions make people unable to see their God-given gifts because they're told you don't fit this mold, you don't look right, you don't talk right, you don't do this or that. And that is, and I say that because first adults do that. And the worst is when we see our children replicating that behavior in just awful and terrible ways. And so, I do think young people are their role is to be courageous and to innovate, but they can't do that if we crush their spirits. And I think if they are going to try something new, it's best if they can also build on the lessons that their elders have already learned. And so I think there's that means that we who are not young, I know in some circles they still consider me young. I'm 41. Like, I just feel like that's over, right? I'm at least halfway through. I'm not young anymore, but I know in some circles they still would like to call me that. I feel like it's the role of those of us who have tried to share with those who are leaning in this moment. And I say this because I love young people. I'm really excited about what young people have done in the climate movement. And I am really cognizant that generational tension in the way we see it is really part of hierarchical problematic systems. And that when you look at indigenous systems, there is much more intergenerational connection. There are rites of passage where one generation is passing on to another, but also saying, like, you got to try this for yourself. You got to go out there and experience this. And I think I am excited about young people, and a charge to those of us who are no longer young that we should celebrate young people, but we also need to ask some questions about things we should be doing and are not doing. Like, I just see a lot of us going, so glad the young people are out there.
Yes.
Climate change. That's great. But the deep solutions, in my opinion, come from systems that are much more intergenerational. And that means healing some really tough tensions. It means, one of the things I lean into a lot within the Black church, and I'm in the in-between group, really pushing a lot of the older folks to say, you cannot ignore the conversation around queerness. Like, you can't. It is your inability to have that conversation is creating a rift that is not healthy for us, and it will hold us back from moving forward as we need to. We need to have this tough conversation. And so, I affirm the power of young people, but it does not abdicate that elders also need to get it together and behave differently so that we can unite the energy and the wisdom, the courage and the perspective, like all of these things. We need all of them to mobilize to where we're called to. And I'm concerned that a few too many of us, maybe even sometimes me included, are okay with the generation when I think those are a product of the problematic system we have, and we need to innovate into a new way of being with each other. Or quite frankly, in this instance, maybe we need to reach back to some things that we've forgotten or lost, in terms of how all of us across the age spectrum have a role to play in the work that we're called to.
Yes. Yes, I almost heard a little sermon start to come up in there. I was like, all right now.
I know we just needed an organ. So then I could,
so where's my tambourine?
That's great. It's that Tuesday night Bible study up in there.
That's right.
No, but thank y'all both for answering that and, calling us to meditate on our role in working with young people who literally are, being inherited this earth, this future. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And I'm just thinking about the present, the current climate of the country, both in its politics, its protests, but more specifically, the pandemic is what I'm thinking about. Coronavirus, right, has been this new norm that we've all been surviving in different aspects of survival. But my question is, what does the coronavirus pandemic reveal about how we have treated each other, how we treat each other, and how we've treated this planet? And I don't know if those things are connected. They feel connected for me, but I don't know if anybody wants to start. Reverend Mariama, how you feel about that?
Yeah. So I think that there's a number of levels. The first is that I think the pandemic it offered us an opportunity to have a shared experience that could have led to a much deeper conversation. And I have seen that happen in some places and spaces. I have seen people be able to see each other more clearly because of our shared vulnerability. It has brought to the forefront things that are not new, that Black bodies, that brown bodies always suffer, more than others because of the many compounding inequities we face. And I do believe that the vulnerability of the pandemic is a key reason why people felt the experience of George Floyd in a different way. Because it ain't as horrible as what happened. This is not the first time that's happened. I think it's the first time that it's happened when we as a nation and quite frankly as a world were feeling our deep vulnerability. When he said I can't breathe, all of us had imagined what it would be like to be on a ventilator, literally unable to breathe. Some of us had to watch our family members through windows because we weren't allowed to be in there, watching their lives, their breaths fade away. And so I think there is something about the pandemic that has exposed us to a deep vulnerability, and that has opened a space, as Arundhati Roy says, that pandemics can be a portal. And for some of us, it has been. In some ways, it has been. And at the same time, you see people re-entrenching. I think it goes back to what I said. When we feel that anxiety, we have the opportunity to imagine something new and to lean into it. I think there's some of us who really don't want to lean into that, don't want to lean into that vulnerability, would rather pretend like it's really not happening. And so I think that's really challenging. But I also think, so I'm a little bit of a prepper. That in part happened after I read Parable of the Sower. I did go to one prepper meeting in the South Shore, and of course I was the only Black woman there, and not everybody was in fatigues, but it did feel like everybody owned a gun with me, and I was like, this is a lot. But I know how to can. In fact, I had a little canning accident but I have I've soups and I got pickled beets and I'm ready to go. If the food system break down, I'm ready, right? And as a person who preps a little bit, so the upside is I think a lot more people are preparing. The downside is if you've spent time thinking about real disaster scenarios, this is actually not that bad. And the fact that we're falling apart over what is not like the most intensive disaster scenarios, makes me a little concerned that we are not physically prepared nor mentally prepared for the kinds of collapse that we are instigating in our climate inaction. Climate change is already happening, but right now we're like, hey, let's just push it and see how far we can go. How could we have droughts, tornadoes, like, you know, and hurricanes and fires all at the same time? Like, that's what we're walking towards. And when I see how unprepared we are, I'm a little concerned. So, you know, again, I'm not saying when people say, oh my gosh, now you're making me scared. Don't be scared. You got time to prepare. Use the time to prepare. And that's one of the things I have encouraged my parishioners to do. Use it to prepare physically, thinking about your food plan, thinking about your exit plan, you know, all of those kinds of things. But also, like, what are the practices that are going to sustain you when times get tough? Because it's going to keep getting tough. And we will all need to be mentally and spiritually strong to face the future that we're walking towards.
Yes. Yes. I think the pandemic showed how much we don't, as a country, don't believe our government should care for us. And if we do believe it should care for us, it's like very isolated, and it's only certain people it should care for. And I think it also showed that no matter what level you are economically, there's such a thing about there's a hierarchical relationship to humans. So as somebody who has a lot of wealth deserves a lot of opportunity, and someone who doesn't, you know, all of the pain has to prove itself. It's not bad. It can't ever just be that it's a terrible story that somebody got hurt. It's everybody wants to prove, well, somebody got hurt, somebody got violated. He was home from college. He was in the army. She got all these kids. Like, she went to church. Like, we don't have a basic, that hundreds of years of our foundation, that hundreds of years of enslavement of people, and then segregation, and then the Ku Klux Klan, and then the this, then that. All of it is a part of our government structure. And I don't know that people want to fight for, believe we deserve better. And I mean, like, all people, I know people, there's lots of people fighting, so don't get me wrong. But the fact that it's so easy to politicize health care. You know, it's like a foreign idea. You go to other countries and everybody has health care, and here we're like, no, you know, like, let's make it really hard. And the fact that it's politicized, guns in schools, like, we just don't know, like, what it means to have a government structure that is based on the care of the citizens in the country, and the lands and the waters and all of the other things, and trying to do that and not be a country of severe exploitation where the economy runs everything. And the economy is based on these few people. It's not all our economy. It's the economy that makes certain group of people wealthy and powerful. And that is not a lot of people. And what the pandemic showed is to me, it showed a lot of things. One, we can stop, and we can stop peacefully. We can all stop. Like, and if you told me I would ever hear New York City silent by like 7 p.m. with no cars, I would be like, did a nuclear bomb fall? But it was the most beautiful thing. Like, we stopped. We bought into it, and we stopped. And it was like, the first few days it got quieter and quieter and quieter, and then, you know, and there was a bunch of sirens, and then it was like, I live a block away from Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. It was nothing. I didn't hear a car on my street for days. I heard all of the nature I mean, as I could hear birds from so far away. It was incredible. And it smelled so good. And so I just was like, shouldn't we just stop once a week, every month? Like, what did we learn from this? And the other thing is, as messed up as our healthcare system is, there are like so many hardworking people that I don't even understand why they keep working, because the government has literally thrown them under the bus. So to me, the whole thing is about care. The whole thing is about, like, look what we can do if we agree to do it. And the fallback is America's foundation, which is lying to itself and making statements of facts around humans and land, so that a small group of people can have power. And then a mass of people follow under it. And I think the pandemic showed me that there is no worse thing that we will ever collaborate on. People who feel like they deserve care, they deserve love, people who are aligned, trying to be aligned with the planet, people who don't choose violence first, people who are not, packing their houses with guns and ammunition, people like that are like, we trying to live a life. And the other people are like, over my alive body will you do that, because I will take everybody out before it's possible. And that is it. Like, I was like, oh, the pandemic wasn't scary enough. And tonight I heard this report of a nurse in South Dakota, and she said she has patients. You saw that? She has patients who have COVID and they are dying, and they refuse to accept that they got the virus. They are like, no, I have, I have lung cancer, or I have this other thing. So the fact that it's become something other than what it is makes it very hard to deal with. And I think our government really has to invest in the under, because at the top of just saying, wear a mask, take care of each other, there are people who don't care. They refuse to believe it. And to me, it's the same kind of psychotic thinking that governed over my ancestors, which was horrific. And so the pandemic is showing us a window into a system of brutality that's hung around this country since it started. And there can't be no coming together until we all face that system and say there's no room for it. So the leadership that we put into place needs to be leadership that really thinks about people differently from like what we just experienced for 4 years, but also the vicious movement that it has ignited. That is a violent-based movement, a white supremacist, violent-based movement. And so now we can stop saying like, well, if aliens come to the, if there's a war with aliens, we gonna come together. No, we not. We not coming together, because we can't deal with ourselves.
Absolutely can't deal with ourselves. I think there's even a movie, it's escaping me, where aliens do come and the government gives up black people. They give the black people up, of course. No. So, okay, so I have one more question. I actually have tons of questions, but I do want to get to some of the questions from audience members. So this will be my last one, unless I have time, I sneak one in. But clearly the government has failed us, right? Whether it be universal health care, whether it be this current election and the denial of democracy, whether it be perpetual and from history, but there is this notion that even specifically right now, other countries have had 2-week, 4-week, 6-week lockdown, and we don't have that kind of national law as it comes to protecting folks around this coronavirus. So we cannot depend on the government right now. What is the role of family? What is the role of community members? And then we'll transition after that. So I don't know who wants to take that first. Okay, go ahead.
Because I know what the Reverend is going to get down on this question. But I would just say our relationships are everything. Like they're the number one thing. Our relationships with this is the most bright, shiny light ever is your relationships. This is going to be won by relationships. This is going to be evolution through relationships. This is going to be transformed through relationships. Education is going to come through our relationships. Like if you are feeling down and depressed and like, oh my God, everything's over. No, it's not. Get you like a relationship. And it can be one other person, or it can be a beautiful church, or it can be sitting, at the feet of a poet. It can be what it can be. But through our relationships, we actually can create the systems that we need. We can create the communication we need. We can create intimacy in our neighborhoods, which I think is really important. When things fall apart and people get scared, it may not be something from over there coming. It's about how does your neighborhood function in the face of like some fear? Do people know each other? Do people have a plan? Have people had conversations? And I'm like, I want to hold on to my place. So people are like, when you gonna go somewhere? I'm like, I'm not walking. That's not what I do. Like I've had, 12 operations on my hips. So I'm not going to be a walking person trying to leave, Brooklyn, New York. I'm going to be staying in Brooklyn, New York. So the relationships are the things. They're just everything. And, I'm so grateful for the way that people are cultivating relationships right now. Like, we have so many medicine people. We have so many legal practitioners. We have so many grassroots politicians. We have so much spirit guide. We have so many people conscious around food justice. I don't want to forget like the theaters. There's a reason why I'm here, because there's an institution called ArtsEmerson that really is like this creative energy can affect the community, which can therefore affect relationships. So to me, it's everything. Absolutely everything.
Yeah, so Toshi went first because she knew she was gonna basically steal my answer, right? Like, I when I look at my life, like I am where I am because of the web of relationships that were around me. And what breaks my heart is the fact that so many of us feel isolated and feel alone and feel like we don't even have 5 other people we could call and rely on. And so I think for all of the work I do a lot of policy work around the Green New Deal and solar, low-income solar and police reform, and all of that is important. Like I believe in that. But when the world falls apart, like I need to know who my peoples are. And when you feel like you're losing, the days that I've lost young people too early, young people who mattered to me and meant a lot to me, like none of those policies could stand in the gap with me when my heart was broken. And so I think that, the importance of relationships, I mean, it just can't be overemphasized. And I think the other piece, the way we talk about it in churches, we talk about building that inner relationship with you and between you and the creator. Like that's really, really important, because nobody can take that away from you. Like you could be locked in a cabinet in a jail and you can still, have that. But the importance of knowing that you can hold somebody's hand, that people have your back, gives you a courage. I just don't think it's hard for most of us to access that kind of courage unless we know somebody's cheering us on. And I think as we talk about this work of reimagining and innovating, we have to do it in community. If we want to create new systems, they can't just live in your head. You need a group of people that say, we're going to try that out together. Like we have small groups in our church, like they meet and they start in December. And one of them is called resource redistribution and community care. And it's like the two sides of that is, yes, people are thinking about reparations. We are a multiracial church and people are thinking about how do we invest differently. But we're also talking about how do we make family of each other so that we give to each other, not just because there's like some external system or some contract that we sign, but because we say, like, I invest in you because you are my sister. Like, God brought us together regardless of what, like, obviously our skin is different or, you know, our age is different. If we went outside, people would be like, you're not legit family, but we choose to be family. We believe that we belong to each other. And so how do we create systems of belonging to each other? And out of that, create whole new ways of being that are not about me dominating you, that are not about what I got and what you don't got, and how can I get you to give me your labor for the cheapest amount? How do we create completely new ways of sharing? Because I think it's important to note really quickly, money only is powerful because we all believe in it. Money and currency itself is a collective decision. If an alien came from like the stars, they'd be like, it's a green piece of paper. They might wipe themselves with it. Like, they wouldn't know it was anything, right? We all collectively agree to believe in that. We all collectively agree to believe in some other things that would do us so much better and create so many new possibilities. And I think those decisions to believe in something different are most powerful when they start with people who really love each other.
Wow, I appreciate both of those. I needed to hear that, you know, especially now with, you know, social distance, it seems even, you know, more difficult to maintain relationships that we believe we belong to each other. I'm gonna hold on to that. And I'm gonna transition to some questions from community members and keep us in the light of community and ask this first question, which I think is specifically about the project you were working on, Toshi. I'm going to read it just so I don't mess it up. But this project seems to have been incredibly collaborative, even at its inception. Can you talk about the idea of community building through the creation of art and how that is different than community building through the consumption of art?
Ooh, wow.
I know, right?
Wow, through with the questions. Yeah. Yeah, Octavia E. Butler's Parable the Sower, the opera, is definitely a collaborative, you know, a collaborative piece. It's my mother and I worked on it together, and then my mother retired, and when my mom retired, she was like, go ahead to see if you can get it done. But the way that it got off the ground was really a group of, you know, a group of theater people who work in theater, but we're not like a company. So it was, you know, Mayan Wong and Shanta Thake, Eric Ting, me, friends who have been following, and we kind of pulled together the first kind of production system for the opera, and this was in 2017. It's a long story, but I'm just going to start there so we can jump ahead towards the question. I got a fellowship at University of North Carolina in 2017, and University of North Carolina was going to be the U.S. debut of the opera, and my fellowship started in January, and the opera was going to debut in November. And I based my whole fellowship on issues that surface in Parable of the Sower. And my fellowship was supposed to be a collaboration with faculty and then community that faculty has been wanting to work with at the University of North Carolina. And it was facilitated by Carolina Performing Arts. I don't know if you can understand like how powerful this was, because what it meant was it was looking at faculty who have so much skill and knowledge and asking them like, in what way do they want to work with particular community practitioners? I was supposed to work with one like faculty person, but I work with so many people on this. And because of this work and because of who Octavia Butler is, it's not like you can just go by yourself and be like, this is what's going to happen, because so many people have their hands on this work. So I kind of just tried to make a path that was collaborative path towards the show happening. But about 1 month, I realized like the show was going to be a belly button, and I was never not going to be a part of a community in the Triangle. And that happened all of the places we did the show, except for the international places where I couldn't really do what I do. But what I do is in the communities that the show is happening, I try to show up multiple times and be collaborative with the community, surface the issues that the community wants to surface in relationship to this work. I work with artists, I work with teachers, educators, tech heads, like whatever, anybody like who wants to, and then let them, because they're already in their community, already doing what they do. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm just helping to create in this path. And if I have residency and I have financial support, it's even better. And so every time we do the show, it has an energetic force based on the community that we're in. And then they're stuck with me. Like, they're stuck with me because I'm like, well, what else can we do together down here or over there or whatever? So it truly is. And Boston, I have like a website, Parable Path Boston. And the Boston Parable Path is really incredible and very collaborative. And this is an example, this very like conversation is an example. The book read is an example of how we interact with what already fabulously exists in communities. And then practitioners from all of the other cities usually come together and create things. And some of that is even happening virtually here. So you are absolutely right. And then the difference is that the art is serving the community. There's everyone who presents Parable commits to having accessible ticket prices, so that the community is really represented in the theaters. And people often come to a Parable show and say they've never seen an audience like that in the theater. I don't know that would be true for Boston, because ArtsEmerson just does such a good job. But in many places, there are always free tickets. They're always like people have done incredibly innovative things. So we try to get everybody in the room that wants to be there. And we see it as serving the community. So that's what we do.
Thank you for that. I like that. I think we're touching on a lot of things as far as relationships, right? Relationships with our government and those, traditional systems, relationship with family members, community members, relationships through art. Someone from the audience is asking, how about our relationship with the earth, with all of creation? Our beloved earth is hurting right now. So I guess the question is around, what do we do to foster the relationship with the planet Earth? What do we need to be doing? I know Reverend Mariama, you talked a little bit about that Green New Deal, but maybe, that's the relationship that we should be in or shouldn't be in.
So I think it's a multi-pronged question. It's dysfunction on so many levels. We need to restore it on so many levels. I mean, and some of it is first shifting our orientation, our thinking, really embracing a way of thinking that sees ourselves in relationship with the earth. I tell people the work I do is ecological justice, because ecology looks at the systems of relationships and the different entities that share space. And we have a dysfunction in our relationship with the earth and with really all of the creatures around us, because it's almost like we think of the earth as one thing. It's like so much, there's teeming with life on levels we can't even see. Like, so I think we have to shift our thinking. And part of that also is, you know, Brian Stevenson talks a lot about proximity. And I believe that's true also in our relationship with nature. We have to get out there and be in. Take the time to sit under a tree and be thankful for the shade that it gives. Take the time to climb a mountain and be like, wow, this is amazing, you know? And so I think, and sometimes, you know, you don't have time to get away that far, but like we're in Boston. I often go running at Carson Beach and just like, even in the morning, if you wake up just early enough to see the sunrise and just to be like, wow, you know? And so I think that we can't neglect the real work of being in relationship. I am a gardener. I'm also a farmer. Portia, you know, Dara and I are part of the farm in New Hampshire together. Our own little acorn we're trying to build up there. Growing means so much to me. In a year where I had 5 of my young people shot over a 10-month period, that is the year I got seriously into growing. And I didn't make the connection till a few years later, like, plants were like bringing life into my day when there was death all around me. And so I just think we also have to be proximate. And then I think we have to ask, what are the personal shifts I need to make in my relationship with nature? How do I have a deeper level of gratitude for water? Think about how I'm not wasting it. All of those things that we can change in terms of our personal habits. And then I think that last level is what are our structural policies that are doing harm to the other life on this planet. And so, you know, I am involved with the Green New Deal, and you know, our way of thinking is that we cannot shift climate policy unless we radically transform our economy, because our economy is our usual excuse for why we can't do better. And so we need to choose policies that create an economy that doesn't find ourselves in opposition with our planet, and that allows people to sustain themselves in non-harmful ways. We can have people sustain themselves where they honor the power of the sun, as opposed to, you know, drilling into the earth to pull up, you know, fossil fuels, which are just like long ago dead plants, long ago dead animals that like have turned into oil. We have to shift our whole way of being so that we don't choose ourselves over the earth, but we can make a choice to walk together in the kind of sustainable, harmonious relationship that we could have. And now is the time to start building it, because like if we don't, she's about to be like, deuces, y'all can't stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think going back to that first question about, you know, what has this pandemic provided, you know, it's been my partner's birthday and we can't really go anywhere but be outside. So I have been spending a lot of time in nature. Watched the sunrise this morning, almost got swallowed by the tide yesterday. But it has been feeding me. It has been a relationship that I'm nurturing in a way that has felt good and healthy for me. So I'm going to hit this other question. It's come up about 3 times. So I think it's important that I ask it and get y'all's response on this. But it's about hyper empathy, right? So do you think hyper empathy exists? Can you talk about Lauren having to hide her hyper empathy? And do you think hyper empathy might have been the norm for ancient peoples and was largely lost through embodied trauma, which froze or stuck that ability? So feel free to dive first into what you think about hyper empathy, what you think about Lauren and hyper empathy, and what is that link or clue to the past that Butler is giving us about hyper empathy?
Like
So who would
that
like to go
question
first?
about the ancient ones got asked 3 times. That's amazing.
No, just the hyper empathy. Those are all the
Oh,
questions
okay,
about
okay.
hyperempathy.
I'm just like
That's
I have
great.
actually have never thought about that last part of it. I have several friends who identify as hyper empathetic. Like they're just like that. And when I hang out with them, it is a little bit like they feel and sense a wider circle than I do. And they're not exactly like the book where, you know, if they see violence, then it happens to them on their body, but they're just they vibrate. So I do think that there is a version of it that is happening. And I think, you know, I have this podcast with Adrienne Marie Brown, Octavia's Parables, and we've talked about hyperempathy a lot. And we feel like Octavia really wanted to give access to well, there's a couple things, because how hyperempathy syndrome shows up is it's a drug that Lauren's mother takes, and Lauren's mom, and the drug, when you take the drug, she's in college, and when you take the drug, it makes your brain have more access so that you can study better and so that you can like get through all your tests. It's not like speed, but it's used the way, you know, speed was used. And then that drug, the people who took that drug, their kids became what they call sharers in the book. So you see this, it's connected to something else. It's connected to like trying to, you know, address a certain thing through drugs, and then it becomes this. And I said earlier in the conversation how, you know, Lauren had to face a bunch of challenges. One, the way her father treated it. Her father treated it almost like it's like, you know, if you get sore, it's like, no, keep fighting. You know, it'll go away one day or something. And Lauren was just like, no, this is how my brain works. And she accepted it very early. And I think that's one of the biggest things in this book is that she has this thing. Her father, who is kind of her favorite person, is looking at it wrong. And she was able to like love her father and be like, but he's not right. Like, this is the functionality of my brain, and I need to learn how to deal with it. So her evolution is, as a child, she would bleed every time she saw anybody have a bloody nose. She would just get one. And then she taught herself not to do that. And I talked about some of the other evolutionary things that she did so that she would be able to be functional. But at some point, keeping it a secret is, in terms of how she's building Earthseed, is actually not a good community practice. Being with somebody who's a sharer means that when there's violence, that person can be taken out at any time. And it makes a group vulnerable. And so it has other gifts, but that's what it does. So I think the moment in the story when she actually has to say like, hey, to the people she's traveling with, I'm a sharer, is a really big thing. Because going back to our conversation about relationships and community, sometimes, you know, your relationships are not with people that you know. They're based on on what's happening. I often go into stores and I think, this is my tribe. If something happens right now, like, these are my people. And so the people that she starts out with are not her best friends. And one of them, she doesn't even really know that well. So those are the people that she has to trust with her information, because they're traveling together and they're constantly in danger. And I think it's a huge deal. You know, I think it's a huge deal. And it's that commitment that we're talking about with relationships and community building, is that sometimes you have to risk your vulnerability inside of a group. And in this particular case, it makes the group stronger. I can't really answer the ancient. I just want to think about that so much. I've just never thought about it before, but that is an awesome addition to the hyper empathy question, which I'm actually gonna think about.
Yeah. I mean, I will say connected to that, and I'm whether or not it's true is definitely above my pay grade. But what I do know is that oftentimes animals can still sense energies in the air. So, for instance, when the major tsunami hit Indonesia, what they said is many people's pets just like ran away, and people were like, "What just happened? My dog just ran away," and it was because they could feel the sort of kinetic energy of the wave coming, and we're like, I'm not going to stay here, right? And so I think it does not seem beyond possibility that when we are in pain and when we are struggling and when we are happy, that it shifts the energy around us. And maybe previous humans that were not nearly as self-centered, and maybe previous humans who were paid much more attention to their environment rather than trying to manipulate it all the time, maybe they had more ability to feel those shifts in energy. I think in terms of the question of hyperempathy, I think it would be beautiful if we all had it. Because I think if we all had it, it would change things on such a deep level. If you had to feel the pain that you inflicted on people by acting a hot mess, you might be less likely to act a hot mess, right? Like, so, you know, the challenge is when some people have it and some people don't. But I do think, while I think we should cultivate some of the more debilitating aspects, I think we should all be attempting to lean much more deeply into vulnerability. Like when I do, I actually often try to engage in conversation with folks who are like very, very different on the spectrum than me. I recently had a conversation with someone who told me that COVID was going to go away after the election because it was all a hoax. And to lean into those kind of conversations, I have to be willing to put myself out there, because you actually find that even folks who you may think would be like vitriolic and really anti, when presented with your authentic, vulnerable self, like a lot of times people find you can access the best of people sometimes in that way. And so I think that hyperempathy is something I wish many more of us were cultivating, because I think that we are in the toxic place our nation is right now. We need some more hyperempathy. Something that allows us, because people who are, even the folks who are out in the street being real extra. What I've learned is when I was working with young people who, many of whom were, quote unquote gang involved, blah, blah, blah. Under all that bravado is deep pain. Mm-hmm. Under all that yelling is crying. And I wish we had more ability to access that. I wish I could say to somebody, maybe even really give them a deep hug and be like, you being a hot mess towards me and it's not okay, but I know that underneath there, something is not right. There's some deep pain, there's some deep insecurity. And I would like you to not have to hold on to that anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. I like that question, especially about hyperempathy, because I think you're right. If we all just, even just thought briefly about how we impacted others, I think the world might shift just a little bit. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I personally still have questions, and there are tons of questions from audience members that will not get answered this evening. But one question, or I'm trying to group some of these questions, and folks are noting that both of you respectively lead collaborative groups, right? And I think, Toshi, you talked a little bit about a tribe, so to speak, and that at any given moment, anybody could be your tribe. And Reverend Mariama, somebody pointed out that you lead a congregation that is diverse in queerness and age and racial and ethnic identities. So I guess this closing question is, what do we need to do to foster diverse communities? How do we embrace diverse tribes, if you will? And how do we make spaces welcoming? I don't want to say safe, but welcoming to different folks.
Yeah, that is $1 million question. And I'm not going to tell you I have it all there. I think what unites my congregation and helps us to lean into it is, I think most of us come driven by the recognition that this world is falling apart and it's absolutely not the best we can do. Like, we are driven by the belief that God's desire for us is something better than this. And that to get to it, I believe, and I think, we believe that each person that comes to the earth brings a part of the solution of what we need to do and be to get to a different place. And the problem is we've been ignoring so many different people's gifts. The problem is we haven't been cultivating and creating spaces for people to manifest the part of the solution that they are, the part of the gift that they have to bring. And so, I think we are trying to create a space where everybody can really be their authentic selves and bring what they have to the table so we can figure out how to save ourselves. Because people talk about saving the planet. Planet's going to be okay. She might be a little banged up, but she's going to be okay. What she's not going to do is let us stay here acting like we're acting until, she's done burned down. So I think this question of how do we look at our collective vulnerability and lean in to the gifts each of us brings, because ain't none of us got it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And we need each other. I need what you have. You need what I have. Some days I'm going to fall down and I need somebody to lean on. And then when it happens to you next week, I'm going to have your back. And so I think that again, that proximity and that desire to belong to each other, I think that really grounds us and helps us lean in even. And one of our core values is tension. Mm-hmm. We recognize we are different. And so we're going to have times where it gets rough. And that's just par for the course. Don't fall apart when it happens. Let's just lean in and figure out how we get to the other side of this tense moment.
That's so beautiful. When I was little, my mom told me if I had one good friend, I'd be winning. And and I've believed that my whole entire life. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to have this ability to have like everybody that we share intimate space be our good friend. And I think what's more available is, can we agree on some basic practices to hold space together? And I love that you said tension. In the book, they're like, we watch each other's backs. We do not steal from each other. We won't kill each other. And we are walking up this road, and we have a practice of at night, somebody has to keep watch. We have formations. Oh, they end up having all these babies moving with them, and they create a structure around it. And everything is unknown. They never know what's going to happen. And some of these people don't know each other at all. Like, these are not like these are developing relationships. They're not like they're not resolved. And we see all the time that you do get stuck someplace, and it's like, 7 people that never met each other before, and they have to figure it out together, and they have to make an instant practice. And I think, be encouraged like that, to be in spaces with people that you don't have that like yummy, this is gonna be my buddy feeling, but that you have that will respect some practices, some common practices that will help you move through things. And to also be encouraged by the idea of that sometimes your group is just not that big, at some point. A lot of the groups are very small in this as they build. It's 2 people, it's a person with their child, it's 2 sisters, it's this, and they get to come together and form something. It's a step-by-step situation, and it is not something that is, you know, considered a big skill of being human, but I think it's one of the best ones. I would say kindness eases everything. And so to just carry kindness in your back pocket wherever you go, it will help every situation. It'll help you take a deep breath and listen to a room instead of getting anxiety and trying to dominate a room. So kindness is a really important tool, especially when you got to operate in a group with tension and get to another place.
Wow, thank you both. Thank you both. I don't know about y'all. I'm an educator, but I love to stay on time. So we're coming in, Toshi, with your closing words right at 7:30. I'm going to leave folks with 2 of the things that I'm kind of holding and cradling from this conversation as we move forward in this world. The first is kindness eases everything. Kindness eases everything. And we believe we belong to each other. We believe we belong to each other. I could feel those shivering in my body. I want to thank you all both so much for spending this evening with me. Reverend Mariama White-Hammond, thank you so much. And Toshi Reagon, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for hosting us at the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. This has been a great conversation. Please let it be the start to conversations, and folks look for resources to continue this amongst your tribe, right?
Yes. Portia, thank you. You're like such a good moderator. Yes. And you're awesome. Yo, I got to get your book though.
That's great. Thank you. You guys are incredible. Thank you all so much. I don't know if we're off camera yet. I hope the tech people are doing what they need to do, but thank you all so much. That was a great conversation.